Is Leandro Trossard edging closer towards an Arsenal exit? We'll discuss the club's financial position, which might provide an indication of what we still can or can't spend. And we'll take a load of your thoughts and questions from the live chat. All of that to come and more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to the pod. We are back. We are live at our normal time of 10 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much for joining me. Apologies for the delay again in getting yesterday's pod out. If you want to go and check it out, you can. We talked a lot about Eberechi Eze. We talked a little bit about Victor Gyökeres and his integration into training. And we covered some other topics as well, but we did save a topic for this morning, and that is the topic of Leandro Trossard and his future. So we're going to get into that, as I say, in a lot more detail. Plus, we're going to go through a piece that The Athletic released this morning in which they talk about the club's PSR status. They talk about the club's finances. And does that give us a little bit of an insight into what Arsenal can or can't do between now and the end of the transfer window? There is a lot to unpack today, as there always seems to be in the world of Arsenal. Just a quick update for our patrons. There is a new Patreon piece out now. We recorded it. It is out. It is available to you, and it is around the expectations of Arsenal going into the 25-26 campaign. It's something that's been playing on my mind, something that's been bugging me a little bit. And that's as a result of, I think, going on the radio quite a bit over the last couple of weeks and being asked the same question repeatedly. Does Mikel Arteta need to be sacked if Arsenal don't win the Premier League or the Champions League? What's the expectation? What's the minimum that we're sort of demanding as a fan base of Arteta and his team and of our football club? And so we had a little bit of a discussion around that over on the Patreon side of things. I hope you enjoy it. Check it out. It's available now. The link is in the description below. Good morning to everybody that's joining us live and to everybody that will be watching or listening to this back a little bit later on as well. Really appreciate you guys being here and your consistent support of the pod. Just a quick update as well. We will be bringing you another one of our watch-alongs. We will be live tomorrow as Arsenal take on Spurs in Hong Kong. I think kickoff is at 12:30 UK time. Let me just double check that. Bear with me a second. Hold on. Just making sure I don't send you all down the wrong route or make anybody miss the game. Yep, 12:30 kickoff UK time. That is Arsenal taking on Tottenham Hotspur at the Kai Tak Sports Park in Hong Kong. North London derby being played overseas. It's not gone down too well with everybody, but you know, we get why they're doing it. And I suppose it adds a little bit of spice, doesn't it, to the preseason game? Plus, if you lose it, you never want to lose to Spurs. But if you do, I think it's probably easier to get over, isn't it, than losing a game in the Premier League or in one of the cup competitions against that lot. But anyway, let's get into our stories today. Let's get into the main bulk of the content. And we'll start with the Arsenal's financials. Now, there was an interesting piece that came out in The Athletic this morning, which I had a read of while I was having my morning coffee. And it talked about Arsenal's financials. It talked about PSR. It tried to give a bit of insight into how much headroom the Gunners have. It was a piece written by Dan Sheldon. I'm not going to read through the piece. Obviously, The Athletic's pieces are behind the paywall. If you want to check them out in full, sign up, check it out. It's really good stuff. I think it's one of the most valuable subscriptions that I have, and I've got a lot. I've got Netflix, I've got Disney Plus, all these things to keep the kids happy. And The Athletic costs a fraction of those, and it probably gives me the most satisfaction of the lot. So I would check it out if I was you. But basically, Dan Sheldon's piece talks about what Arsenal have spent so far in the window. Arsenal spent close to £190 million so far. Kepa, Mosquera, Madueke, Norgard, Zubimendi and Gyökeres have all come in. 6 players in, but we've still spent nowhere near what Liverpool have. And Chelsea have spent more money than us too. The thing with Chelsea, though, is that they just sell so damn well, don't they, every single summer. I mean, Joao Felix has gone over to Saudi Arabia for like 50 million quid. How? He's been a complete and utter flop at Chelsea. Like, for what it's worth, I think he's a talented footballer. I do. But it's not worked out for whatever reason for him. Yet Chelsea are able to sort of cash in and make mega money on this player, which I just think is incredible. Liverpool have just sold Luis Diaz and probably will sell Harvey Elliott for a significant amount of money, and probably Darwin Nunez too towards the latter stages of this window. So those clubs have spent more, but they've also sold for more. And this is where you got to be sort of realistic about what Arsenal can and can't do. And we'll come on to this in a little bit more detail when we talk about the players that could potentially leave. So yeah, the Athletic have sort of done a little bit of a deep dive, a little bit of an investigation into what Arsenal can still do, how much leeway they have for further expenditure when it comes to PSR. But you've got to factor in the UEFA rules as well. But as I say, this will give us an idea of how likely or unlikely it is that Arsenal spend big again before the window closes. Now, they highlight that since KSE took full ownership of the club back in 2018, we've recorded losses of 328.7 million across 6 years. However, the revenue has grown. And that'll be partly because the club have done well commercially, but it'll also be because we've been in the Champions League. So doing well on the pitch does bring great financial reward. It's the argument I've always made, and it's the argument that a lot of us were making at the time when it felt like KSE maybe weren't necessarily in it for the right reasons. My opinion on them has changed over the last few years because there's been a huge expenditure on players. But at the same time, you still ask the question of, right, but how far are you willing to go? Like, how far are you willing to push it? You know, you talk about ambition, and that's great. And yes, we are seeing expenditure, but are we ever going to see the level of expenditure that would almost, nothing guarantee success, but that would give us a much bigger chance and would set us apart from everybody else? That's the question that people have still about KSE. But yeah, Champions League qualification, finishing higher up in the Premier League, all of that stuff has been really, really beneficial to us on the financial side. Although we've lost all that money, it was estimated, or it was previously estimated, again by the Athletic, that we could lose up to £97 million in the next period that's going to be recorded and remain compliant with the financial results. It seems like then, on that basis, if we've got that kind of headroom, that sales are not essential. But obviously, if we make a big purchase, then we could be sailing quite close to the line. And we know that Arsenal as a football club don't want to do that. Now, whether you or I agree with that is another debate and another discussion. And I've seen a lot of criticism for other clubs and other ownership that have sailed very, very close to that line, and at times have had to take sort of drastic action, like selling their women's team to a holding company or selling a car park and all that kind of nonsense, right? We've seen clubs do what they need to do to dig themselves out of a hole. We've seen other clubs like Nottingham Forest take gambles. You know, Evangelos Marinakis, who we talked about a lot on TalkSport 2 yesterday because I was working with the brilliant Max Scott, who's a Nottingham Forest fan. He was willing to kind of swallow a penalty, which I think was a 4-point deduction in the end, to sort of cross that line, because the way he weighed it up was, actually, that still gives me a better chance of succeeding in my ambitions than it does sort of not breaking the rules and making sure that I don't, like, he thought that buying the players or doing the deals that he did that ultimately took him to that point were worth more than the 4-point deduction. And it proved to be the case, and Nottingham Forest are in a great position moving forward as a result of that. I've touched on Chelsea and the ways that they've got around it. So we're in a place right now where, as much as it sounds like sales would kind of increase the appetite to keep spending at Arsenal, they don't feel essential. But then you start to look at the players that we're being linked with and the players that the fans want. Like, you think about Rodrigo, right? If we've got headroom of about £97 million, and I don't know what the headroom would be on the UEFA front, but just focus on PSR for a minute. If we've got headroom of around about £97 million, but Rodrigo is going to cost £80 million or £75 million, hell, even £70 million, I would imagine that Arsenal would see that as them putting themselves into a sort of somewhat precarious position and sailing too close to the line. Now, again, there'll be fans out there that say, just do it. Like, just do it. We're not accountants. Just do it. We're only focused on the football and all the rest of it. But from what I know about the way that the club like to operate, that just doesn't feel realistic. And people will come at me and say, oh, you're sort of defending it and you're advocating it. No, I'm not. Because I actually like the idea of getting creative around this stuff. I think it's the only way that you maximize the potential of your football club. And we've seen others do it. I'm not against sort of pushing really hard up against the rules at times to get what you want. You know, it's one of the reasons that I look at Marinakis from the kind of outside as an Arsenal fan and think, I quite like this guy. I know that there are people across the Premier League and people in sort of footballing circles that think he's bad for football. But imagine being a Nottingham Forest fan and knowing that there's this guy there that's willing to do whatever it takes to make your club succeed on the pitch. It's probably a really nice feeling. You know, Tottenham come in, they try and pinch Morgan Gibbs White. They seemingly trigger the release clause, but the fact that the release clause went public angered him to the point where he stamped his feet, threw his toys out the pram, and threatened to take legal action against Tottenham Hotspur. I'm almost certain that if Tottenham Hotspur had really kind of pushed and pursued this, they probably win. Because if that release clause exists, they've got to release it. But I'd imagine that just from the sheer noise he's made, Daniel Levy's gone, look, forget about it. Like, I like Morgan Gibbs White, but this is not worth the aggro. This is not worth the hassle. And again, has Marinakis broken any laws or broken any rules? No, but he's willing to kind of push boundaries and test people in order to get what he wants. And I'm not saying that I want Arsenal to be run like Nottingham Forest are being run, right? We're a completely different and entirely different beast. But I don't have a problem with the club maybe getting a bit more creative in terms of how they do things, because we're one of the few clubs that don't. And on the one hand, that's something to be really proud of. And I know that if you talk to people within the Arsenal hierarchy, and I've had conversations and been involved in conversations in the past where that's something that the club are really, really proud of. And I get that. But also from a fan perspective, would I have an issue with Arsenal going in a slightly different direction and being a little bit more on the edge in that sense? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't personally, but each to their own. I guess, look, if we're talking about sales and, you know, what those sales could do for us in terms of unlocking funds or unlocking that ability to go out and improve our team further, we got to be realistic about what we've got to offer here. Okay, let's skip over Leandro Trossard for a minute because we're going to talk about him in detail in part 2. But you know, he is one of the players that's being talked about as a potential outgoing. Then you talk about the likes of Vieira, Lokonga. Where's the interest in those guys? Where's the interest at prices that would move the needle or make a difference for us? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up loaning both of those players out between now and the end of the window because there doesn't seem to be that concrete interest. Now, I get that when you're a player who is out of favor and you're a buying club that is maybe looking at one of those guys and thinking, you know what, they could do a job for me, you'd probably say, let's hold on until the latter stages of the window. That's when Arsenal will be desperate. That's when the player will be desperate to find some kind of solution. And we're more likely to get a favorable deal under those circumstances. Another player that was talked about at the beginning of the summer was Jakub Kiwior. I think he is someone that you could generate funds from, but you know, his stock is high at the minute, which makes me feel like actually it's probably a good time to cash in if that's where the route you want to go down. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important to the squad. And especially with Gabriel injured at the back end of last season, he proved that worth. He's probably going to start at left centre back at Old Trafford in the first game of the season, as it stands right now. That's the guy I would pick ahead of Calafiori for sure. And then the other player that people talk about, or the other couple of players, are Alexander Zinchenko, but given his wages and the fact that he's probably unwilling to drop those down too much, it's unlikely, I think, that a club will break the bank to sign him and satisfy his kind of personal wants in terms of that salary. And then you've got Reiss Nelson, another one that's been heavily linked with a move away. It's going to be really interesting, I think, to see if Reiss Nelson is a part of the squad when we face Tottenham on Thursday. That will give us an indication as to how close or not that potential move is to Fulham that we keep hearing about. But again, that's going to be on a loan deal with the most likely outcome at the end being that Fulham have an option to buy him. And I get where they're coming from because, you know, they won't want to take too big of a risk on a player whose fitness has been really patchy. And that will obviously be a cause for concern. So you go through that list of players, and there's no one really that you feel that we're going to get really significant money for, or the amount of money that would move the needle too much in terms of what we can do. Now, on yesterday's pod, we touched on the need to kind of keep the wage bill under control. And I'll repeat what I said yesterday for those that didn't catch the episode. I do feel like that controlling the wage bill, making sure that we haven't got too big an expenditure every month or every week, depending on how these guys get paid. I think that is probably more important than generating transfer fees. I think it's about having room within the salary structure. I think that will be the priority. But again, like, yeah, you can generate a bit of money by doing this and create a little bit of headroom. But again, do I look at that list of players that are outgoing and think any of them are going to make a massive difference, a massive material difference to what Arsenal can do? I'm not sure. So, I'm kind of on the fence about how big Arsenal will go between now and the end of the window. Like, they'll look at it and go 6 signings. You can't really ask for much more than that. If you're the manager, if you're Mikel Arteta and you went and you asked for what you wanted at the start of the summer, I mean, you couldn't have realistically asked for too much more than the 6, could you? And expect that those needs are met, or that those requests are met. Don't know. But yeah, let's see how it shapes up and how it goes. But I do think that if you can get a few of these guys off the wage bill, that will probably create that little bit of extra headroom on top of the 97 million that we can kind of afford to lose in the next PSR accounting period, while remaining compliant with the fiscal rules. So, yeah, let's see what's going to happen. Right, we're going to take a short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk Leandro Trossard, because according to the Times, it's becoming increasingly likely, I beg your pardon, that the Belgian is going to depart Arsenal between now and the end of the window. We'll get into the ins and outs of that. And in part 3, of course, we'll take your questions and thoughts from the live chat. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner pod.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Like and subscribe. A couple of you in the chat just referencing Thomas Partey's wages and the saving we've made on that. Yeah, fine. But we've brought Martin Zubimendi in. We've brought Christian Norgard in. We've brought a number of players. I'm sure Victor Gyökeres is on a decent amount of money. I'm sure Noni Madueke is also on a decent amount of money as well. So, I feel like what we've sort of cut down on already, we've probably already accounted for with the players that we brought in. But can we make a bit more of a saving, and will that, just increase the appetite and encourage Arsenal to go and do another bit of business between now and the end of the window? You all know the bit of business I want to see us do. Whether it's realistic or not is another thing. And we talked about it yesterday. How serious are Arsenal about Eberechi Eze? It was interesting to gauge you guys' thoughts from the live chat, because the vast majority of you believe that that's a real possibility. I'm kind of like 6, 7 out of 10 at the moment, in terms of 10 being very likely and 1 being unlikely, but we'll see how that goes. Don't forget, before we carry on, to leave a like on the video. If you haven't done so already, if you're joining us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel as well. If you are brand new, we'd love to have you as part of the Chronicles of a Gooner family. And remember, we've got a live watch along of that Spurs game coming up tomorrow, which I'm really, really looking forward to. I much prefer talking about football than transfer hypotheticals, that's for sure. But yeah, leave a like on the video. There's a lot of you watching. We've only got 81 likes on the board. Come on, let's get up to 250, 300 or so by the time the stream ends. Check us out on Patreon if you're interested. There's a link in the description to our brand new Patreon video, which dropped this morning. Go and check it out. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. Right, let's talk Leandro Trossard. Now, according to the Times, he is increasingly likely to leave Arsenal during this window, and there is interest from Borussia Dortmund of the Bundesliga and a couple of unnamed Premier League clubs. So Trossard's got options. And if we're being honest, that was always going to be the case, wasn't it? He's a very good player. He's a brilliant attacking player. He's got a real good instinct for goal, I think. He pops up in the right areas a lot of the time. He's a wonderful finisher. I've said for a while that I think he's the most reliable finisher that Mikel Arteta has within his ranks, and that might change now with Victor Gyökeres coming in through the door. But I certainly felt that he held that title at Arsenal, at least, for the time being. Last season was a difficult one, I think, for Leandro Trossard, partly because he never had the right players around him for long enough, and partly because he played out of position a lot, in my opinion. But when you think about what we paid for him, which was not even 30 million quid, and the impact that he's had, some of the important goals he's scored, the way he's been able to fill in on that left-hand side, the way he's been able to come off the bench and really impact games, I think it's been very, very good value. Now, if Arsenal could generate some money for Leandro Trossard this summer, given he's going into the final year of his contract, as it stands, that would be really good business. If they got 10 million, if they've got a third of, or just over a third of what they paid, I think that would represent good business. But then you've got to weigh up whether it's worth that little bit of money that may or may not make a material difference in terms of what you can do in the transfer market versus the value of Leandro Trossard, the footballer. And it comes back to what we were saying when we were talking about Eze yesterday, right? What makes business sense doesn't always make footballing sense, and vice versa. If nobody offers sort of 15 million-ish quid for Leandro Trossard, I would make the case that actually keeping him is better. People keep saying that, if we let Trossard go, then we'll be able to push for Eze. And again, I'll come back to the salary and wages point. It probably gives us a little bit more room to kind of get close to and get to Eberechi Eze's salary demands. But does bringing in £10 million for Leandro Trossard make a big difference in terms of being able to trigger that release clause? I don't think it does. And I keep being told and I keep hearing that actually Arsenal's interest in Eberechi Eze is separate to their interest in a winger. But I don't buy that necessarily. I would be shocked. I would be stunned if Arsenal were to bring in Eberechi Eze and a winger, even if Leandro Trossard went. Part of Eze's appeal and why, if I were Mikel Arteta going into the boardroom and trying to pitch to those that sign the checks why I want Eberechi Eze, I would be saying he can play in that position and he can play in multiple other roles as well. Left 8, right 8, 10, false 9. He could do all of those things. And because he could do all of those things, that would be my kind of justification for the spend. And so to go in there and say, I want Eze, and that to be accepted as being completely different from the interest that you may or may not have in a wide player, I don't think that's going to wash with the board. I think one of the reasons that the Eze thing makes sense, as I keep saying, is because he can do that role and others. And that's why, as a club, you might be willing to push the boat out that little bit further in terms of what you're going to spend to get it done. So, yeah, I just don't see a world, even if Trossard goes, in which we sign Eze and a winger. So, for me, I'm sort of managing my own personal expectations around that. If we do it, great. I'll be delighted. I'll be buzzing. I'll be over the moon. But can I see it? No, I can't. And sometimes if something doesn't make sense in your mind, it's probably because it's not going to happen. I think with Trossard, if he stays, he's going to get minutes. But, how many minutes, we don't know. It's clear that for Mikel, from a tactical perspective, Martinelli's ahead of him in terms of that starting 11. It's not to say that Trossard can't have as big an impact off of the bench, but he's probably not going to be a starter. Noni Madueke gives Arsenal another option from that left-hand side as well. If Eze was to come in, that's another option from the left-hand side. And you just feel like Leandro Trossard's place in the pecking order is falling. And you can understand why, given he's going into the final year of his contract, and there seems to be no desire on Arsenal's side to extend his stay at the club, even if there was talk of an improvement in salary. You can understand why he'd be assessing his options. He's got new representatives, and new representatives often bring new opportunities, although as far as we're aware, that wasn't the reason that he changed his agent, because he was itching for a move out of Arsenal. It was said to be due to the health of his previous representative, who felt that he couldn't do the job to the best of his ability anymore. So I do think people have made too much of the change of agent. People do it at times just to freshen things up, and that's fine. But if I'm Leandro Trossard and a Premier League club or a top Bundesliga club are saying to me, come and sign for us and we'll give you a 3-year contract. Meanwhile, he's going into the final year of his Arsenal contract, and there might be a slight increase in the salary, but there isn't really any appetite on the club's part to kind of really, give him something that makes him feel confident and comfortable about his future. You can completely understand why he's open to a move. And there's some reports doing the rounds this morning. Not entirely sure how accurate they are, but that Arsenal have indicated to the player that they won't stand in his way if a move comes along that he really kind of wants to take, as long as, of course, the conditions work for Arsenal as well. So, yeah, it totally depends on, what people think is good value for Leandro Trossard. My question would always be, is what you're going to get from Leandro Trossard worth what you're losing in the player? Because if you're going to let him go and you're going to bring in a young prospect in a season where we need to win now, and at a time where we want to really kind of take that next step, then I would argue that that's probably not the right thing to do. And that would be us essentially prioritizing money over the good of the team. And I don't want to see us do that as a fan. I know that the club might look at it differently. The money men might look at it differently, but that's not how I look at it. So those are my thoughts on the Leandro Trossard situation. We're going to take another really brief pause, really, really brief. And then when we come back, we're going to react to something that's just broken. Hand of Arsenal, who's been incredibly accurate and super reliable during this transfer window, has just dropped an Eberechi Eze update on X. We're going to get into that. We'll cover that off right after this. Don't go anywhere. Okay, what have we got? I feel like I've used the title Eze update on this podcast so many times in the last few weeks. But this is what Hand of Arsenal, now known as Hand of Berta on X, love that, has had to say about the Eze Palace thing. Now, I'm reading this for the first time as well, so my reaction is legitimately going to be raw here. The release clause does indeed have an expiry date that comes into effect before deadline day, but I'm not sure this changes the value that Palace have placed on Eze. Right. So what he's saying there is that whether or not Arsenal officially trigger the release clause by the deadline, which is towards the end of this window, Crystal Palace's stance on what they believe Eberechi Eze is worth is about the same. So when that release clause expires, they're not just going to go, oh, well, now the release clause is expired. You know what? Give us 50 million and we're fine. No, they believe that that's his value, and they're going to be sticking to that valuation, at least at the very beginning of any negotiations that take place. Arsenal and Palace have engaged in talks. Multiple sources have confirmed that. As of today, Palace are looking for approximately £30 million as a first payment for any agreed deal. Personal terms are not an issue, but there's been no further advancement of today. Right. So in answer to the question we asked yesterday around how serious Arsenal are about Eberechi Eze, if those talks have taken place, if they've engaged in talks with Crystal Palace, which we've heard reports of before, but maybe not from the most reliable of sources, at least in my estimations, then there is hope here, right? There is a chance here that Arsenal are going to really kind of push for this. As of today, Palace are looking for approximately £30 million as a first payment for any agreed deal. That is not unrealistic, for Arsenal. And that's not taking the piss either on Crystal Palace's part. I don't think he's one of their most prized assets. I did see Oliver Glasner sort of getting a little bit tetchy about the start of the season in an interview that he gave a couple of days ago, where he said, look, I've got a really short squad, and if we're going to let more people go with a view to sort of strengthening as we get closer to the season and sort of as the window goes on, then, you might see a bit of a false start from us again, a bit like we saw from them last year. And I don't think that was factored in by those sort of who were very vocal in their criticism of Palace at the start of the last season. Personal terms, not an issue. Never thought there would be, but no further advancement as of today. So is it a case of Arsenal going in there and going, let's understand how and if this deal can be done, and then going, right, cool, we need to get a few of our other issues sorted and need to get our sort of house in order in terms of maybe some of those departures. And again, I talk about players leaving. I don't think it's about bringing in big transfer fees, because I don't think you're going to get big transfer fees for any of the players we mentioned. But I think it's about managing the wage structure and the wage bill. So I think that's probably what Arsenal are waiting for here. And I'm just guessing. I don't know this. This is not information or an exclusive. This is me just telling you what I think. I think Arsenal have gone in there, tried to understand the how and the if this is possible, and have now sort of taken a step back to try and figure out how they proceed while maybe getting some of those other situations in order and under control, and having an understanding of what direction those situations are heading in before committing anything to Eberechi Eze. But this does give me encouragement that this could happen, and that's what you want to see, isn't it? That's what we like to see. Okay, we'll get into your questions and your thoughts very, very shortly. But first, I just want to tell you guys about a wonderful app that has been launched. And it has been launched by, this is not a paid ad or anything like that, so don't switch off. I know people like to switch off when we do those. This is a message that I got from a dear listener of ours who's launched a new app called Shouts. And it's the new football prediction game. You predict scores, predict first goal scorers, you earn points, and you climb the leaderboard. And it's free to play with a £1,000 prize for the overall winner. Now, that's for the overall winner of the game. It's not just, it's not for the private leagues, as I understand it, that we're talking about here, because there is a private league that's been set up in honor of the Chronicles of Aguna. And the private league code is, and I'll just put this on the screen, bear with me. Hold on. So it's the game's, let me write this out so that you guys can see it. The game's called Shouts. To find the app on the App Store, I think you have to type in shouts.gg. So search, let me write this out. Here we go. Search for on Android and iPhone, as I understand it, in your App Store. And the Chronicles, let me just put TCOAG, that's much shorter, isn't it? TCOAG private league code is A520AC. Okay. Let's roll this across the bottom of the screen for the next few minutes. So if you're interested in joining the Chronicles of Aguna League on the brand new football prediction game, Shouts, this is what you need to do. Go into your App Store, search for shouts.gg, download the app, and the Chronicles of Aguna private league code is A520AC. Get involved. I'm going to be playing as well. As soon as I get a minute, I'm going to set myself up on there, and we'll give it a go, as TD Down Under says. So a shout for a shout. Yes, exactly. Love that. Check it out. We'll leave that running across the bottom of the screen for the remainder of the pod. For those of you listening on audio, I'll just repeat it one more time. If you want to join the app and play with the rest of us, shouts.gg is what you need to search for in your App Store. And the Chronicles of Aguna private league code is A520AC. Check it out. Okay, let's get into some of your questions and some of your thoughts before we sign out. So keep them coming. Right, what have we got in the chat box? Rumble is rumbled, I think, because he says Arsenal done this with Gyökeres, though, when we were talking about the Eze deal and the fact that, the 30 million first installment feels, I think, quite reasonable given his importance to the team. He says Arsenal done this with Gyökeres, though. They took the piss out of a very good deal from Sporting. Was it a very good deal? Like, I think in the end we struck a very good deal, but that required patience and really kind of strong negotiation tactics, and having convinced the player that, this was the place for him. He then pushed from his side. I don't think Arsenal took the piss out of Sporting. I think Arsenal got a fair deal, a good deal. Maybe Sporting will feel a little bit undercut, but generally I think look, their president turned around and he said, if people think that he's going to leave for 60 million plus 10 million euros, that is, in add-ons, they've got another thing coming. I never promised that to anybody. And Arsenal go and get it done for 63 million plus 10 million in add-ons. And we might not even pay that entire 10 million because we don't know necessarily and exactly what those add-ons are made up of. My point here is that if that guy comes out and says, well, there's no way they're getting it done for that, that's way too cheap, and then we only pay slightly more than that, we've got a good deal here. It took a bit of patience, and there was a lot of frustration, with myself included, around that. But in the end, we got what we wanted, and we got the right deal. So I'm not going to criticize Arsenal's approach there. Big shout out to Jacob for your kind words. James Nichols said that Granit Xhaka's joined Sunderland now. We talked about that a little bit on yesterday's pod. I get why Sunderland would jump at that. I don't know why Granit Xhaka has jumped the other way, but he loves a challenge, doesn't he? And I wish him all the best. I really, really do. Bill says, if we buy Eze now and sell those no longer needed, I would not buy a winger at this stage. We can review that in January. I think it's highly unlikely that we would buy Eze and a winger. I know people keep saying that the interest is separate. Arsenal are looking at a winger, looking at the potential of bringing in a winger, and looking at Eberechi Eze. I don't think there's a world in which we sign both during this window. I agree with you. What else have we got in the live chat box? Morning to Lynn, who's just joined us as well. Augustine says, my desired signings for a long time were a striker and a left winger. So far on my demand list, only one item has been sorted. Get that left winger, Berta, and make my season. I guess my question back to you, my friend, is would Eberechi Eze satisfy your kind of thirst for another signing, or does it have to be a specialist winger? Because Eze would bring us something different to what we have in Martinelli and Trossard on that left-hand side, but I wouldn't categorize him as a specialist left winger. So let's see, A, what we end up doing, and B, would you be fine with that? He says Eze with fire emojis, so he must be pleased with that. He must be excited by that prospect for sure. Let's keep rolling through the chat. Russ Morgan says that Fabio Vieira to West Ham. I think if I was Fabio Vieira, I would want to go abroad. I know we're not going to get the same money probably from abroad, but at West Ham, I don't know if he succeeds. I don't know if he succeeds. I think he's a really talented footballer, brilliant left foot, really intelligent. Physically is where I've always had a bit of a concern for Fabio Vieira, and I don't think going to West Ham is going to necessarily aid him in maybe covering up that slight shortcoming, if you like. What have we got? Sniper Scope says, did Edu not have contacts or the pool? So he used money and wages to get players to join, basically. And yeah, maybe our league form forced him to pay extra for players, but Calafiori going from 20k to 100k, I think your comment's supposed to continue, but it hasn't come through. Basically, the crux of the question is, do we think that Edu had to use money as a kind of bargaining chip because he didn't have the same pull or contacts that Andrea Berta does and Arsenal do nowadays? Well, first of all, that's the point, isn't it? Arsenal wouldn't have had the pull that they do now 3-4 years ago because we weren't in a position to compete for the biggest trophies. So that's not necessarily on Edu. Did he maybe give up funds in terms of wage negotiations and transfer deals a little bit earlier? Did he sort of compromise or back down at an earlier point in negotiations than Andrea Berta? Again, we can only guess. And my guess would be maybe. But, that comes with experience. And listen, people like to kind of really stick the boot in on Edu. I hear it so often, Berta's brilliant and Edu was rubbish and all this. Listen, the truth is somewhere in between. Andrea Berta's incredibly good at what he does, clearly. It's why he was one of the best in class. It's why we went out and got him. Edu, far less experienced, but did a very good job of getting Arsenal back on the right path. You cannot deny that. You cannot deny that. Sometimes someone can be the guy to take you to a certain point. Edu was that, but then you need someone with greater experience, greater expertise, and of a higher level to then take that next step. And, the club, I think, has progressed and developed at a rate quicker than maybe Edu was developing as a sporting director. And that's why when Edu decided to leave, I don't think he would have been sacked, by the way. He decided to leave. But if he decided to leave, that's when Arsenal sort of sat and thought about who comes next. Jason Ato was in contention for the job, but they decided ultimately that we need to go and get the best in class to take that next step. And it feels like that's what they've done. Jid says, Harry, if Trossard leaves, his replacement would either play off the bench or if they start Martinelli, would be going soon. He's young and too used to playing first-team football and being in contention for Brazil to want to sit out the majority of the season while other Brazilian forwards are playing consistently. The World Cup's coming up. Please don't bring up the mythical squad game theory. You keep saying this. You say it every single day that the squad thing is a myth. It's not a myth. Last season taught us that it's not a myth. One of the reasons that Liverpool ran away with the Premier League title last season, you know what it was? It was because they had multiple attacking options. And so when it wasn't working for one, someone else could come on. Salah was the star, but the supporting cast was constantly changing. If it wasn't Jota, God rest his soul, it was Gakpo. If it wasn't Gakpo, it was, McAllister contributing from midfield. It was Dominic Szoboszlai contributing from midfield. Their richness and the vast array of options that they had made a big, big difference. And so I'm not saying that you're not going to have an 11 that you prefer, but everybody's going to play a big role. And Gabriel Martinelli, I don't really care if it impacts his chances on playing for Brazil. I care about what's best for Arsenal. And that's what Mikel Arteta will care about as well. We don't give a shit about his prospects of playing for Brazil. With all due respect, I'm sure to him it means the world. To me, it doesn't mean anything. I just want to see Arsenal succeed. And if there's a better option out there, and that means that Martinelli is going to play less minutes, then so be it. And if Martinelli, or any other player for that matter, because it's not about Martinelli, decides I'm not going to stand for this, I want to leave, then fine. See you later. He's not such a great player. With all due, I love the guy, but he's not that good a player that I would, prevent my manager as a football club from going out and doing what I think could really make a difference, just because I don't want to upset his feelings. We're past that stage where we can care about people's feelings and people's own personal ambitions. He's got to be about the club and the team first and foremost. Twerk for Work says, did you hear Gyökeres scored 8 goals in his first training session? Is that good? First of all, I have no idea if that's true. And second of all, I mean, it's a training session, isn't it? Like, does it really matter? What was he playing one-on-ones and he scored 8 out of 9 or whatever? Who knows? What else have we got? Let's take one or two more. Lots of questions about cashing in on Martinelli and Trossard. We've done all of those before. And we talked a lot about the Trossard situation a bit earlier on in the show. So I'm not going to go back over that. Where was it when I was talking about Liverpool there? Jermaine says he didn't want to say Nunez. Well, no, I don't think Nunez contributed enough, and hence why they want to move him on. The DJ Sweet says that Martinelli is going to end up being benched by Noni Madueke. That could be the case. Who knows? Right. You know what? Going to leave it there. Going to sign out for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate all the love and support. Keep the likes coming. If you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. If you're new, turn that notification bell on as well. That way you'll never miss an episode. We've got so much to come over the coming days. We've got that watch along tomorrow of the game against Spurs. We've also got some review content coming out later that night around the Spurs game. We've also got a podcast with a guest on Friday morning. And then, of course, we're going to be with you on Saturday and Sunday too. Although Saturday's episode may be pre-recorded just because I've got some work going on in the house. And I think I need to be across it. Baby Symeou is nearly here. Very, very nearly here. We are running out of time to get the essential works completed. And if I don't get it done this weekend, there's going to be hell to pay from Mrs. Symeou. So I need to get it done. Thank you all so much for the support. Again, as I say, don't forget to like, subscribe, all the rest of it. Check us out on Patreon. There's a new Patreon video out now. Go and have a look. And I'll see you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful Wednesday. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.